This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
My homework is
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
It's Thursday, and it's time to get started here today. Thank you for tuning us in. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Thursday. The hotline will be open today, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. A lot to talk about today, including the follow-up and the continued coverage of the terrorist attacks in Brussels, Belgium. We'll have a conversation about Republicans pushing back now on a plan by the Michigan Board of Education, the State Board of Education, to allow kids to pick their own pronouns, their own gender, their own bathrooms and sports teams. We'll talk about the big pushback there. And we'll talk about the top 5 most overlooked tax deductions, so you know what you're looking for when you get to your tax return, how to save some money this year. We're going to start with this, though. The Islamic State, having taken credit for the attacks in Brussels that killed 3 dozen, injured 300 more. They say they're ready to go, well, all the time, frankly. At least 400 fighters have been sent to Europe, they say, in deadly waves of attacks, deploying interlocking terror cells like the ones that struck Brussels and Paris, with orders to choose the time, place, and method for maximum chaos. They're on their own. They're not taking direction from anybody else. It's a network of agile and semi-autonomous cells, and it shows the reach of the extremist group in Europe, even as its losses grow in Syria and Iraq. Officials in Europe, including European and Iraqi intelligence officials, and a French lawmaker who follows the jihadi networks, describes camps in Syria, Iraq, and possibly the former Soviet bloc where attackers are trained to target the West. Before being killed in a police raid, the ringleader of the November 13th Paris attacks claimed he had entered Europe as part of a multinational group of 90 fighters who then scattered pretty much everywhere. But the biggest break yet in the Paris attacks investigation, the arrest last Friday of fugitive Salah Abdeslam, did not stop the multi-pronged attack just 4 days later on the Belgian capital and the subway system. Again, 35 dead, 300 wounded, 3 suicide bombers also killed. Just as in Paris, Belgian authorities searching for at least 1 fugitive in the attacks, maybe another today. They're not sure. They're looking for at least 1 man who was wearing a white jacket seen on airport security footage. And is this the new normal? And it brings me back to my question to you. Are we safer today than we were 4 years ago? What are we doing security-wise to make sure that this sort of regular occurrence doesn't start occurring on our side of the ocean? What are we doing in America to prevent this from happening? Probably everything we can, but probably not all that we can do. Because we are thwarted from time to time, often in fact, by being accused of being xenophobic and racist and insensitive when trying to monitor radical mosques and radical imams and those that preach hate from the pulpit. We are shut down and told we are, knuckle draggers. And with as many as 600 Islamic State fighters in Europe right now, trained specifically to pull off attacks like the one you just witnessed in Brussels, you have to wonder, when is the next attack? Good Friday? Easter? More than 4 sources with access to tallies of fighters tasked with Europe attacks independently corroborated the numbers of fighters who trained for specific attacks in Europe, including some who have spoken to fighters directly. Others have cross-checked information regarding fighters leaving or returning. So somewhere now between 400 and 600 secret cells of soldiers. The shadowy cells were confirmed by Europol, which used to be called Interpol, but it's Europol now, which said in a late January report that intelligence officials believe the group had developed an external action command trained for special forces-style attacks. French speakers that have links to North Africa, France, and Belgium appear to be leading the units and are responsible for developing attack strategies in Europe, said one security officer. You know, it just makes you wonder which way we're going here. It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder what we're doing here at home to make sure that we're being looked out for. And I bring up this idea of the comments about bigotry and xenophobia and so forth. But here's what fuels it in part. Here's what fuels it in part. Another fake hate crime turned out to be committed by a Muslim right here in Dearborn. Most hate crimes, in fact, against Muslims turn out to have been faked, mostly so that Muslims can claim they're being persecuted, and the counter-terror efforts have to come to an end, and the authorities fall for this virtually every time. Dateline Dearborn. A local Muslim woman dropped her 2015 federal lawsuit against members of the Dearborn Police Department, whose officers, she claimed, violated her civil rights by requiring her to remove her hijab when she was taken into custody on a traffic warrant. The city of Dearborn, also named as a defendant, said in a statement Wednesday that video taken in the police department's booking room during the arrest revealed that her claims were false. Maha Adolami had claimed in the lawsuit that she had pleaded several times with officers to allow her to leave her religious head covering on because of her deeply held religious beliefs. She claimed that if she didn't remove it, it would be removed against her will. When presented, however, with video evidence from the internal investigation led by Police Captain Isa Shaheen, her story fell apart. Her attorney withdrew the lawsuit, and away she went. Dearborn police remain committed to respecting the rights of all people within our custody, and we follow a stringent policy regarding religious head coverings, said Dearborn Police Chief Ronald Haddad. We knew this lawsuit had no merit and are glad that the people we serve can have confidence that our officers acted properly in this case. You see, this is just part of the smokescreen. Oh, we're being mistreated. There's hate crimes. No hate crimes here. Just part of the scam. Just part of the scam. It's important to know that we can trust our police, I would say. All right, when we come back, probably the most controversial story in Michigan right now has to do with the State Board of Education. We're going to get deeper into this. The State Board of Education putting up proposed policy guidelines that would allow students of any age, kindergarten through 12, K through 12, to pick their own gender, their own pronoun, their own name if they're so inclined, pick their own restrooms, compete on whichever sports team they feel most appropriately fits their gender. The outrage is understandable and coming back in force. It's Thursday. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
Congressman Dan Kildee is calling for Congress to stay in session, at least until they can vote on the $500 million package, give or take, of money for Flint. It would be for removing lead water pipes, taking care of health issues for those exposed to lead, dealing with the children that have high lead levels in their blood, and economic development, of course, because there's always got to be a pile of freebies in there. You know, I think that's what angers people the most. Okay, we have a problem in Flint. We're going to spend $500 million, but what about the next town? What if it's Kalamazoo or Muskegon or Owasso? all of which have high lead levels in certain areas. They're all going to be lining up for their cash payout now that Flint gets theirs, wouldn't you think? If you would just stick to dealing with the problem at hand and not getting into economic development and early child education, all this stuff, yeah, that's all fine and well. Not part of this discussion. Not part of what we're trying to solve right now. Let us solve this problem for this price. Then you can pile on with all your goodies and add-ons and freebies and buy votes at another time, because right now we have something more important to get handled. Just a thought anyhow. Congressman Kildee asking Congress to stay in session. By the way, that $500 million, give or take, to be split evenly between the state and federal treasury. Half the money coming from federal sources, half of it from state sources. It's mind-boggling. A group of House lawmakers in Michigan yesterday condemned a draft policy initiative by the Michigan State Board of Education that could allow students to use any school restroom they choose and allow male students to try out for girls' sports teams, all while keeping parents in the dark about their children's everyday activities. So says a posting online at the Michigan House Republicans' website. I'll continue. This is a quote. As the parent of a 15-year-old daughter, I am outraged. At the Michigan Board of Education, this policy is evidence of a government bureaucracy run amok and goes well beyond their scope of educating our children. So says Representative Lena Tice of Brighton. The board has no business trying to take away parental rights, and this ill-conceived policy would put the health and safety of our children at risk. Gary Glenn, a Midland rep, says, quote, this outrageous policy forcing K-12 girls to share their bathrooms, locker rooms, or showers with boys and hide that bizarre radical practice from parents not only violates parental rights, but threatens the privacy, security, and comfort of our public school students altogether. The state board should drop such attempts at radical left-wing schemes and instead focus its resources and staff time on actually educating students. Gee, I think I've heard that before. The Michigan Board of Education has proposed a State Board of Education statement and guidance on safe and supportive learning environments for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning students that the board is expected to vote on at its May 10th meeting. Public comments are being accepted on the proposal through Monday, April the 11th. Public comments are also being accepted right here at 888-900-9966. We strongly encourage all parents and residents of Michigan take time to submit their thoughts to the State Board for review, says Representative Tice. It is imperative for parents to let the board know this policy is unacceptable and encourage the board members to reject the proposal. Now, the board proposals includes these following. It includes a lot, but here's part of it. Recognize students by chosen names and corresponding pronouns. Basically, they can pick their name and pronoun. Using chosen names, I think I want to be called like Blade or something, Use names of unofficial student records such as class, team rosters, yearbook, and school newspapers and newsletters. Use case-by-case determinations for locker room options. Let me make this a case-by-case for you. If you're an intact male, you use the men's bathroom. If you're an intact female, you use the women's bathroom. Pretty simple. Ensuring school dress codes are gender neutral without restrictions based on gender identity, and evaluating all gender-based programs and maintaining only those with clear educational purposes. The point being is that now you could have a boy go out for the girls' basketball team if he didn't make the boys' basketball team, or maybe he just feels like a girl and he wants to play on that team anyway. Talk about Title IX being under assault. Title IX being attacked altogether. Here's another one. Jim Runstead, a Republican from White Lake, writes, as a parent and former foster parent, I am committed to protecting my teenage daughter's safety and privacy. For safety purposes in public bathrooms, gender should be clearly defined as biological. These considerations are not relevant to career preparation and should not interfere with our other children's privacy rights. State Rep Tom Hooker says, the American College of Pediatricians recently wrote that conditioning children into believing a lifetime of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex is normal and healthful is, in fact, child abuse. The American College of Pediatricians, and here's the quote from the ACP, conditioning children into believing a lifetime of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex is normal and healthful is child abuse. I, for one, want the MDE's budget zeroed out until this guidance policy is revoked and an apology is issued to the people of Michigan. This pushback is only going to get louder, and you have until April the 11th to have your voice heard by the Michigan Department of Education and the Michigan School Board and the State Board of Education and the state superintendent. Yeah, this is something that affects anybody that has school-aged children or grandchildren or may. This affects you as a parent because it not only erodes parental rights, it destroys them. It destroys them. 1-800-9966. Thursday on the Steve Gruber Show.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
All right, welcome back to it. It's Thursday here on the program. This big storm that's on Michigan right now should affect pretty much all of us. Rain here to the south and then freezing rain, sleet, snow mixed in. But once you get north of about Mount Pleasant, maybe a little bit north of that even, all snow. I just clicked onto LakeCharlevoixLive.com, and there's a camera that's live in Boyne City, and it's looks like they've got 2 or 3 inches. Looks sloppy and wet and like a big messy spring storm as it'll be. So be careful out there today. The next guest here on the program is going to help us with a threat assessment because it's hard not to watch what happens in Brussels, Belgium without saying, what kind of a risk do we face here at home? We know that all the services are out there trying to keep, terrorist attacks from happening here in the U.S., but it seems to me that a lot of people I feel that it's probably more likely now than it has been in the past. Dr. Alex Del Carmen heads up the Department of Criminal Justice at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas, joining us on the program. Doctor, welcome aboard.
Good morning.
You're an expert on terror and criminology, so let's start with the fact that in Brussels they knew that they were going to get attacked, and yet they couldn't stop it. That's chilling.
It is, and as we are learning more and more about the details of the attack in Brussels, we are beginning to recognize that there were not only one but several areas of failure by law enforcement and local officials.
Yeah, we look at this, and now we know that some of the terrorists, as often happens, were killed in the attack. Some were not. Maybe as many as 5 bombers still on the loose, according to the Sun newspaper in its big headline today. The problem is that nobody's quite sure, but now there's the big conversation is maybe 400 to 600 ISIS-trained fighters are in Europe to do this exact kind of an attack. Semi-autonomous, not really answering to anybody, just waiting for their opportunity to hit a soft spot. Is that about right, Doctor?
That's about right, and I think sometimes we underestimate, actually. As alarming as those figures may sound to the rest of us, I think sometimes we tend to underestimate, and there may be more. The reality is that ISIS has been incredibly successful in recruiting people all over the world, including here in the United States. And just like the director of the FBI said a few months ago, every state in the U.S. has people that they're looking at as suspicious individuals, and I think Europe is case in point. We have the best law enforcement in the world here in the U.S., and if we have been the subject of penetration by ISIS, imagine what Europe looks like.
As you look across the United States, obviously we've dealt with San Bernardino fairly recently. Chattanooga, we've seen terrorist attacks here on American soil that were rooted in the same sort of radical Islamic belief system that has triggered death here. I don't think any of us would be surprised if we heard that it was going on right now in another American city. But what can we do? I've heard heard one group of people saying that those in the Arab communities and the Muslim communities need to be more aware and more willing to speak out, but they just don't seem to be.
Well, I think that, as Americans, obviously we need to be more vigilant. We need to also demand our government to do what he has been commissioned to do. The primary responsibility of government is to secure and protect the lives of American citizens, both at home and overseas. And I think that, we need to require our government to be forward-thinking instead of looking backwards and reacting, which is what we seem to do historically in this country. And I think that this attack in Belgium shows all of us that ISIS is alive, is well functioning, and it's going to hit us. There is no question in my mind, and the mind of experts across the United States, that the U.S. is incredibly vulnerable to these kinds of attacks, and then it's just really a matter of time before we are hit here in the homeland or interest overseas.
So we've seen these attacks occur in Paris and so forth, where you've got 6 or 8 attackers or 10. In Brussels, maybe 8 or 10. What happens when there's a coordinated effort of some sort and there's 25 or 50 or 100 all working in concert together, maybe in more than one city at the same time? Wouldn't that be a possible scenario as well?
Yeah, it would be, and I think that the objective, of course, of ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, as we dealt with back in 2001, is to create terror. The idea is to show a multi-functioning, terrorism component across the United States, in this case in Europe. But they want to show that they're effective. They want to instill terror in the lives of people. And so the more chaos that they can create, the more that they can affect different levels of people's lives, whether that be at the airport, at the train station, in the case of Belgium. But in the U.S., it could be at malls, it could be at shopping areas, it could be at daycare centers. It is anywhere that people gather that we're going to feel vulnerable.
We're on the line with Dr. Alex Del Carmen, who heads up the Department of Criminal Justice at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas. He's an expert on terror and criminology, and I guess I'm going to focus on what you just said. You said daycare centers and so forth. Obviously, in America, you have sporting events that are big. You have concerts like you had at the Bataclan in Paris and so forth, and you have big venues with large gatherings because we are a free country, and our very freedom exposes a soft underbelly. Our very freedom makes us vulnerable to a murderous attack like this, I suppose.
Right, and so if you look at, for instance, the way the Israelis live their lives, people in Israel, it is a foregone conclusion that they're going to be the subject of screening when they go into a shopping mall, that when they gather in a large gathering, they're going to have several layers of security. The people that live in Israel live with that threat in their mind on an ongoing basis, but they have the best security in the world, unquestionably.
Let me point out something else about the Israelis. Something else about the Israelis that people seem to overlook. Israelis are armed, all of them, pretty well. Private citizens are armed. The army is around. So in this day and age, when I hear people talk about, it's time to get rid of the Second Amendment, I think that is the most foolish thing at this time in our history that people could possibly say. If that were true, then we should disarm the Israelis. And people say, well, that's different. Not really, and not anymore.
Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think the Second Amendment is there for a reason, and I think our founding fathers gave that to us for a reason. And there is no question that is the counter. It seems to me almost to be, as an expert and as a criminologist, as a PhD in criminology, I've always found it almost insulting when people come up with the point that the Second Amendment needs to be modified so that people are more protected. And I've always thought that how can you remove the right of good citizens to carry weapons and continue to enable criminals to carry their own? So it makes no sense at all. And I think to your point, you're exactly right. But if you look at Israel, what I was getting at is the mindset of the people there. And as you noted earlier, in Israel, everyone is a soldier. Everyone has served their country, whether a male or female, and everyone knows how to use a weapon.
That's
There's
right.
a sense of nationalism, and people in Israel understand that they have to pay a price in order to be protected.
Doctor, great conversation. Look forward to having you back on the program. Great conversation. Dr. Alex Del Carmen from Tarleton State University. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
I see the bad moon rising. I see trouble on the way.
Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show on a Thursday.
I see
Kind of going through these threat assessments, but all of these children wandering around with smartphones are like a cover of Mad Magazine. You know what? Me worry? They have no clue, these millennials. They don't fear Iran. They don't fear the North Koreans. They don't fear ISIS. They don't seem to have much fear of anything. So therefore, they don't have much connection to reality. Yeah, so maybe they should vote Alfred E. Newman for president. Trevor Thrall, senior fellow at the Cato Institute's Defense and Foreign Policy Department. Trevor, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Yeah, and this notion that everything's fine, it does remind me of a Mad Magazine cover that I used to see as a kid. You know, and the guy would know too. So they're, what, me worry? That's about how clueless I feel some of these folks have turned out to be. Am I off the mark?
Well, I think there's a couple ways to look at millennials' views about the rest of the world. On the one hand, I'm right with you. You know, they're young people. They're pretty much dialed out of political issues still, as most young people historically have been. And so, you know, they don't really know much about the rest of the world. On the other hand, millennials were all came of age after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. And so in another sense, it's very rational for them to be less worried about the rest of the world than older Americans who lived through sort of the showdown between nuclear-armed superpowers. I mean, you know, frankly, the Cold War was just a lot scarier than the world of today.
Well, and you have to realize, I suppose, and I had this conversation with somebody here recently, and it was, I guess, kind of sobering to realize if you're 25 or younger in America today, you have little or no recollection at all of 9/11. I think about that. It's been 15 years, so if you were 10 years old or younger at the time, you maybe remember it some, and mom and dad were worried about it, but you didn't have a direct connection, a visceral, reaction to it when it happened like people that were adults that day.
That's exactly right, and people who study socialization argue that, pretty much until you're about 14, you're going to have a much more, sort of distant, childish reaction. And mostly for kids, younger than 25, it's a history lesson at this point, not a personal experience.
It is a history lesson, and therefore, they've been conditioned that if you target somebody like an Islamic terrorist or something, that it seems to me they're more likely to say, now wait a second, that's racist, that's bigoted, that's Islamophobia, some other nonsense they pass along my way, when actually, if they understood the history of World War II or the history of the attacks on the World Trade Centers, or if they understood history at all, I don't think maybe we teach enough history in school. Maybe that's the problem. We don't just get, blunt about, these people, if left to their own devices, will kill other people. And you can say that about some different groups of people, but you understand my point. I don't think we teach history very well at all.
Oh, I could not agree more with you, Steve. As a professor myself for many years, I'm always shocked every year at how little history our students know when they get to college.
Well, you look at some of it. You talk about the atrocities in Europe during World War II. They don't even know about those. They don't know about the camps in Europe. They don't know the death camps of Auschwitz and places like that. So we need to teach people better in order to get them better educated. I mean, they've got smartphones, right? They ought to be able to read something and understand something, and yet it seems like they're buried in pop culture and sports teams and other nonsense. Yeah,
I think the Internet has led to a couple of things. One is this incredible fragmentation of the information environment. When I grew up or when you grew up or our parents grew up, there were, on the downside, there were very few channels, fewer sources of information, but those sources were pretty high quality compared to today. Whereas now what the folks pay attention to is, any one of 8 million different, stupid websites or kind of, celebrity Twitter accounts or what have you. And so, millennials, they don't get their information from newspapers or television news anymore.
No, when I grew up, and I don't know how old you are, sir, but when I grew up, every night we watched Walter Cronkite. Now, you can debate the merits of where he was, but it was a lot better than the hit-and-run news you see today. I mean, you turn on national news programs, alleged national news programs, I mean, it's about cooking recipes, it's about fashion, it's about what the celebrities are up to. It's like, this is not news. This is fluff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, this fragmentation of the media has led to, terrible economics. And, one of the downsides of that has been a steep drop in the amount of news about the rest of the world in American news programs and newspapers since the 70s. And so, in some ways, you can't blame millennials because a lot of the news you'd expect them to be following just isn't there in some of the programs that we used to watch.
No, it's not there. And some of the other networks, and there's several, they pass off as news their opinions. So, and people are watching, The Daily Show, considering that a news source. And it goes on and on and on.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think if you ask college students, they would say The Daily Show is the best news program in America.
So, unfortunately, what I'm getting out of this conversation, we're with Trevor Thrall, Senior Fellow for the Cato Institute's Defense and Foreign Policy Department. Trevor, what I get out of this is, in order to wake up these millennials, the largest generation ever, is to have another event like 9/11. How else will they get it?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's possible at this point for most of them. I mean, the older millennials are already old enough, even though they're young, that I think their attitudes, their general worldviews are stuck. The youngest millennials, we probably have a few more years to if for some vivid event to come and change the way they think about the world permanently. But the majority of millennials are who they are at this point. And, it's very curious about 9/11. You would think of all generations that at least the millennials would be the most worried about terrorism, but in fact the opposite is true. And so I'm not even sure at this point that another 9/11 would do it.
So we have created a generation of Marxist Bernie voters that have no clue what goes on in the world. That's good of us. I'm really proud of us right now. Yeah, Bernie voters that have no clue.
I hope that's a little pessimistic, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, you get it. Trevor, thank you very much. Good conversation.
Thanks,
have a great day. It is Thursday here on the Steve Gruber Show. A bunch of weakling Bernie voters. Good for us. Sheesh. 888-900-9966 is the phone number to call. Tell me you can't do it. You can't vote for Bernie. You're better than that. That's why you listen to the Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it off.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
It's Thursday, and glad to have you aboard today. It's the Steve Gruber Show. If we're going to spend $500 million, I guess we better find out more. More information is always better if we're going to spend that kind of money, and it appears that we probably are. Maybe more than that, but the problem with Flint is going to cost tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. If Candace Miller had her way, we'd spend $2 billion on it right now. But of course, who would suggest such a thing unless you're planning to run for governor? Let's give that some thought. Do you think Candace Miller is going to run for governor? Let me just put that out there. An investigation has found that the state of Michigan is, quote, fundamentally accountable for Flint's lead-contaminated water crisis because of decisions made by its environmental regulators and state-appointed emergency managers. A task force appointed by Governor Rick Snyder issued a report saying failures within all levels of government led Flint water users to be exposed to toxic levels of lead. The probe found failings at the state health department, governor's office, and elsewhere. In this little clip we're going to hear here, you're going to hear Governor Snyder and Chris Kolb from the task force. Clip 1, go.
This is an important day in terms of a report being given to the public. If you go back to October of last year, when I first learned that lead was an issue in terms of being informed by state departments of this problem, one of the things I thought was important is we started an independent group to go look at this issue, to go dig into it, to go find out in an unbiased way what the facts were, what the situation was, and come back with recommendations.
The Flint water crisis is a story of government failure, intransigency, unpreparedness, delay, inaction, and environmental injustice. It did occur when state-appointed emergency managers had replaced local representative decision-making. It was a mixture of ignorance, incompetence, and arrogance by many decision-makers that created a toxic and tragic situation that produced the Flint water crisis. And it all could have been avoided and prevented.
This report is being issued, but the action that it's triggering will go on for an extended period of time and for many years, because some of these recommendations deal with long-term health issues of the children and people of Flint, and we're going to follow through. So this is a problem that I've made a commitment to fix. This report is a good tool to do that.
No one asked the question, what will happen if we don't have corrosion control treatment in place? The answer to that question is exactly what happened in Flint. And ultimately, the corrosiveness of that water leached out lead into the system, and people were exposed to it.
We should learn from this. There was a change in a water source, and I think if you look at the recommendations they talk about, there's more questions that should have been asked, could have been asked, and more work done when you're making a dramatic change like this that I think people underestimated in many regards.
They missed the boat completely, and it is extremely troublesome to me that an agency whose primary role, once again, is to protect human health and the environment, came to these decisions, and they never backed off those decisions, no matter how many red flags they saw.
And so that's where we are at this point in the conversation. I think that there's a lot to be debated there. And again, no discussion of the fact that the Flint Water Department violated federal law by not having anti-corrosives in the water or a plan in place as required by federal law by the lead and copper rules. These are important distinctions. You know, I've been talking to people that are up there digging out these water lines. The last time I talked to somebody, they were finding primarily copper lines, not lead service lines. So are we going to pay millions of dollars to replace copper lines that are perfectly good as well? You know, a lot of concerns financially here as to how much money should be spent. I have concerns financially. It can't just be an open checkbook. Well, we feel badly for them because this happened, and it's become a political football, so therefore we're just going to open the checkbook and use all this taxpayer money to paper it over. Well, I don't agree with that. I'm going to guess a lot of you don't either. All right, let's fix the problem, but having it, well, we'll just spend $500, $600, $800 million, whatever it takes. Well, whatever it takes is unrealistic, and it's inappropriate. And it shouldn't happen that way, I can assure you that. Let's see here. Let's move on to politics for a moment. Let's imagine for a moment that Donald Trump isn't going to be the Republican nominee for president. There are three ways this fantasy, and it is likely nothing more than a fantasy, becomes a reality. This is a piece from the New York Post, by the way. One is that something Trump does is so outrageous and disgusting it knocks him out of the race, and by default, Ted Cruz becomes the nominee. Well, that's a possibility. You can stop right there because, you know, Trump can say just about anything and get away with it. The second is that Cruz could win 80% of the Republican delegates remaining going forward, passing Trump and takes it on the first ballot at the convention in July. Also not very likely. The third is that Trump doesn't secure enough delegates to win in the first ballot, and the GOP rises up on subsequent ballots to take away from him and give the nomination to someone else. This is possible. Indeed, it's exactly what Cruz and John Kasich, the candidate with absolutely no shot of winning anything, who's staying in the race even though he won't have many delegates on Tuesday night as well as I probably do, actually. They shouldn't be at all. In fact, they might as well write their own concession speeches right now. The anti-Trump scenario is this. It's July. The convention is coming. After the final primaries in California and New Jersey on June 7th, Trump ends up with 1,000 to 1,150 delegates, short of the number needed to nominate. Meanwhile, polling shows he'd get crushed by Hillary Clinton. Moreover, state-by-state polling suggests that not only isn't Trump taking states from Hillary, but she's on track to take states away from the GOP's 2012 take, North Carolina, for example, and potentially Arizona. A poll earlier this week suggested Clinton might even take Utah if Trump is the nominee. And as goes Utah, so goes, well, Idaho. A comfortable Obama electoral lead in 2012 bids fair to become a Hillary electoral landslide. That would almost certainly mean the Senate would flip from Republican to Democratic control, with a possibility the House could flip as well. Under these conditions, even the threat of chaos and violence from Trumpkins, who seem not to understand the meaning of the phrase "a majority of the delegates," would be worth testing if somehow the GOP could settle on a candidate who might not win but might change the catastrophic dynamic of the race. That's what they're trying to play out. This is the scenario Cruz and Kasich are hoping for. And in hoping for it, they are taking themselves into political oblivion. That's what I've said before. Let's put it this way. If Trump doesn't get enough delegates to win, why would a GOP let entirely loose from primary and caucus results and able to choose anyone that it wants? Why would they choose a candidate that got less delegates than Donald Trump? Do you think a panicked GOP is suddenly going to look favorably on Ted Cruz or John Kasich? I doubt it. And so does the New York Post. Just something else for you to chew on this Thursday morning. It's the Steve Gruber Show. I'll be right back.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense.
All right, if you'd like to join the conversation, you're encouraged to do so. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. You can all check out what's going on at stevegruber.com. That's the place to listen live. Go to the Listen Live button and click that. See how clever that is? And you can find podcasts there as well, including our next interview with Rachel Sheffield from the Heritage Foundation. She is the welfare policy expert. Rachel, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I am so glad to talk about something different for a moment and something important. And welfare reform is something we hear a lot about in election years. I don't know how much traction it gets from time to time, but every now and then some good things happen. And you assert that if there's going to be welfare reform in this country, it has to come with work requirements, something that I and so many people agree with. Tell me what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. So the underlying principle of welfare really should be self-sufficiency for able-bodied adults, and the best way to promote that is through work requirements. So basically, the requirement that if an individual is going to receive welfare benefits, they should be willing, they should work or prepare for work or at least look for work in exchange for receiving benefits. And that's something that the vast majority of Americans agree with, you know, both on the right and the left side of the political aisle. So, you know, it establishes a principle of reciprocity between, you know, the individual receiving the benefit and the taxpayer who is providing that.
And I appreciate that, and I think you're right, and I think you're onto something there. However, you know as well as I do, Rachel, that if you say, well, we need work requirements, you know, God forbid you would ever ask for a drug test for a welfare recipient because you get called a bigot, you get called a racist, you know, all of this venom flies for actually trying to hold people accountable, which is, I don't understand. I've been held accountable my whole life from our school teachers when we were in elementary school, you know, through your work life. But accountability is something that comes with a lot of pushback these days.
Yeah, when you're talking about, I mean, drug testing, for example, I mean, again, like the principle again goes back to that idea of self-sufficiency, and that's really what should be the goal. I mean, if an individual is participating in self-destructive behaviors that prevent them from being self-sufficient, from living a good life, we don't want to be subsidizing that type of behavior. That's not good for the individual. And you know, it's not good for for the people who are paying for it. We don't want to be paying for that type of self-destructive behavior. So that's really the core principle of having something like a drug testing requirement. So, again, it goes back to that idea of promoting self-sufficiency. We want to make sure, we have a safety net. Assistance is available to those who need it, but those receiving it who are able-bodied should be expected to engage in good behaviors and we want to encourage them.
As you know, though, you'll be targeted for, being unfair, for being cruel, for expecting too much, which to me, I think you're right about this. I think most people agree with it. However, the political will in state legislatures and certainly at the federal level, there doesn't seem to be political will to do that. I mean, holding people accountable, expecting them to contribute to what's going on, it takes political will. It takes somebody willing to step up and write legislation. And then the question would be, with this president, or with a Hillary Clinton, or with other governors around the country, would they sign such a measure? And I would question that answer.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen that, with this president, he certainly has not been friendly to work provisions. So I wouldn't expect that we would see him promoting those types of, policies that would support work. But, the idea is that, we need to continue to make the case for it. Back in 1996, when the government did welfare reform, that was under Bill Clinton. And, while he really, it was kind of, I mean, his big thing, running for office, was that they were going to end welfare as we know it. And so, I mean, it took a lot of arm twisting really to really get a policy that truly did promote work. But, again, it shows that, it is something. Work requirements are something that,
and what are, can
Americans
you tell me,
understand.
Rachel?
Mm-hmm.
On the line with Rachel Sheffield from the Heritage Foundation. Tell me what some of the requirements are currently under that 1996 reform. Welfare seems to have expanded since then, but what are some of the requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 1996 welfare reform, that reformed the largest cash assistance program by inserting a work requirement. Now, that reform was successful. You saw a 50% decline in welfare caseloads. You saw child poverty decrease. You saw employment rates among low-income individuals increase. All positive things. However, that was only one program of roughly 80 different means-tested welfare programs that the government provides. And so certainly we've seen an increase in welfare spending. We've seen an increase in, participation, particularly in programs like food stamps. So there certainly needs to be welfare reform. We need to keep going with that. And the 1996 reform really has been kind of watered down. And
I think the real problem is that for a lot of folks is that the traditional family is under attack in these welfare reform programs. If we should have a situation where fathers are encouraged to stay in the home, not encouraging single mothers to collect more money if the fathers aren't there. That's a fundamental change I think has to happen immediately. I'll give you 20 seconds for the last word, Rachel.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That's a huge issue. We need to focus on strengthening the family. Children in single-parent homes are 5 times as likely to be poor, and we've seen the rate of unwed childbearing increase dramatically since the 1960s. Today, 40% of children are born outside of marriage, so that's a major problem. If we're going to fight poverty, we really absolutely need to be focusing on this issue of unwed childbearing and looking for ways to strengthen marriage. That's critical.
No question. Rachel, good conversation. Thank you for joining us today on the program.
Thank you.
There you have it, Rachel Sheffield from the Heritage Foundation, a welfare policy expert. You have to protect the family. You have to encourage rebuilding the family unit. You have to. Because what we've done to the family is, it's criminal. Thursday on the Steve Gruber Show. We'll be right back.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
Let me tell you how it will be. There's one for you, 19 for me.
All right, it is Thursday. Yes, tax day not too far away. Probably has you excited. I think it's one of the favorite times of the year for Ivy and I. to figure out how much money we get to contribute to the greater good of society. Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. Trying to figure out what the best thing is to do, where we can spend our money. In a few minutes here, we're going to have a guest here on the program to talk about what we can write off. What we can write off on our taxes and what is legal. I have the top 5 write-offs for you. And in fact, he's here now. John Pollock, tax and IRS strategist. John, welcome to the program, first of all.
Thanks.
So if I'm having a beer right now, just for the sake of argument, and I'm at work... No, wait a second. Let me rephrase it. If I'm at work having a drink... No, wait. Anyhow, let's talk about some of the top write-offs that people just miss all the time. And I see that beer's on the list, babysitting's on the list. Help me along.
All right, so let's start with beer because it's morning, and that's, best way to get started, right?
Absolutely. That's what I was saying.
So just like coffee in the morning that's being provided by your employer is a tax write-off, so is beer. If it's provided by the employer, if it's something that's at the place of employment, a lot of companies now provide sodas in their refrigerator, at least we do. So that can be a write-off. So it's
now hold on. Hold on. This is really important here. This is there are people right now going, you've got to tell me more, because I'm self-employed. So if I supply to myself beer in the morning, is that a write-off?
Yeah, because it's something that's covered by the employer. So, like, for instance, there's a lot of at least in the Dallas Metroplex where I live right now, and this is big in the West Coast, is these co-location type places. They're like executive suites for the new age. And a lot of them have beer on tap. Obviously, you know that a liquor store can write off beer because it's the cost of goods sold, and a bar can write off beer because it's one of the things they sell, but so can somebody that provides it as part of their business. So, yeah, you can write off beer, sodas, coffee. Yeah, so...
That's a good start. All right, here's something else that because I let's just go right down this road and find out some other things. All right, so I have a home office. I have 2 dogs that I have around to bark when somebody comes to the office as my security system. If I bought the dog or buy the dog food to take care of my security system, is that a write-off?
It could be. So you have to be very, very careful. So let me actually kind of veer into the renting your house to yourself. So there is a rule within the tax code that allows you to rent your house to yourself 14 days a year. It was written in there by a congressman that lived near the Green Bay Packers Stadium, and he couldn't write in, only Green Bay Packers can get this benefit, so he just made it a little bit broader, so the rest of us get it now. So if you have an Airbnb, if you're renting out a room, 14 days of those room rentals can be tax-free, but you also can turn that around and then rent the house back to yourself. Because you're self-employed, you may have to have a board of directors meeting, or you can have me over to interview in your office where we're doing this radio show, and because I came into your office, that was a rental. So those are things that you can do. You got to follow the checklist, and you got to make sure that you're following the rules. But even with the dogs,
so hold on.
Most alarm systems are $50 a month. So,
right. Let me ask you this: if I can rent my house 14 days a year to myself, okay. So is the money I spent? Let's say it's $1,000 a week. I spent $2,000 renting the house to myself. Is that $2,000 something I can deduct to affect my adjusted gross income? Where does this all fit into the tax form?
So there is an actual box on one of the forms that says 14-day rental rule, and then there's a blank spot. So let's say I do 14 days a year, and it's $1,000. We'll stick with the $1,000, and let's say I'm in the 25% tax bracket, so that's approximately just close to $3,000 in write-offs. But what I would do is I would put $14,000 in the box. I have to document it, so if I do get audited, the IRS is going to come to me and say, so you've written off your house for 14 days. Where's the documentation? All I do is supply the paper, which is something that we do for our clients. And then that becomes a tax write-off to the business. So the business pays you the $14,000, pays you, the person, $14,000, and the person receives that money but does not have to record it as income. So it's not a write-off on the personal tax return. It's a write-off from the business. But the money flows from the business to the person. And that's generally the objective of all tax planning, is how do I get to spend stuff on my personal life that is a tax deduction to the business so that the dollars are more efficient.
That's exactly what people are trying to do. Okay, so here's one twist on this. Can I rent the house to my wife? I own the house previous to getting married. Her name's not on the house. Can I rent it to her too? I'm just trying to figure out.
You could probably pull that off if, once again, it's all about documentation. One of the things that people come to me and they say, well, gosh, this doesn't sound legal. Is this going to increase my audit risk? And the way I try to explain it to people is that the default position of an intersection is the red light. If no one goes through it, nobody gets hurt. But nobody thinks that the green light is a loophole through the intersection. Well, the tax code is really only 3 or 4 pages of this is your tax and this is what you have to pay. The other 70,000 pages are green lights. So as long as you follow the rules, if you like, for instance, employing your children is another one of our popular strategies. As long as you follow the laws, there's only 3 rules that you have to do to employ your children and get the tax deduction for it, and transfer from your tax bracket to their tax bracket, which is likely much lower. And
all right, let's hear it. Let's hear the 3 rules.
The 3 rules aren't to work. One of them is you have to have a contract, which we have, shells for that for our clients. Number 2, it's got to go through payroll. So it's got to go through the grid so that the government gets to take their piece, which the government doesn't actually get to take a piece on your own children. And then the third is it's got to go into their personal account, which in most cases on children, your name's going to be on it anyways. So if you follow those 3 rules, then the kid's employed. Understand that none of those 3 rules have anything to do with them working. It's one of those strange parts of the tax code. And what's interesting about it is if I employ your child, I have to pay FICA. But if I employ my child, the FICA is actually waived. So when people think that, well, this is like cheating the government or this is a loophole around stuff, well, if it was a loophole around stuff, why does the government make it so that I don't have to pay FICA on it? It's written into the code. They are expecting people to do this, and they've created rules so that they can do it. So use it.
And so if I pay my children, now you obviously want to say below some thresholds, but that would be payroll that's an expense to my business, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It would greatly reduce my taxable income. It can go into an account with their name on it, but my name as well as a cosigner, right? Has nothing to do with working. Through payroll, is pretty loose description anyway. And a contract, well, I have to sign the contract on behalf of my minor children anyway. So what's the age limit? I have a children that's, 4 and 11.
So
can I employ
there
them both?
is a court case that has a 7-year-old being paid. Like you have a radio show, if you ever do any pictures and you post on your website with your 4-year-old on it and your dogs, then you can throw in a modeling fee. So we have gone below the 7-year-old, especially for businesses that are media-related like yourself.
Sean, I'm sad. I'm out of time here. I need you to come back because we're just getting started on this. This is fun for me.
Yeah.
All right, John. We'll have you back very soon. This is good stuff.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
Now, I realize that looking out the window right now, you're a little depressed. You're seeing rain and sleet and snow, and it hurts you a little bit. But I've got good news. I swear, spring is right around the corner. Soon you'll have sand in your toes, and you'll be in the water, and it's going to be beautiful. I swear it's going to happen. And to spread the good news is my good friend Wayne Visbeen, architect for the stars. I think Wayne Visbeen of Visbeen Architects in Grand Rapids in West Michigan. Wayne, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I was all fired up for spring here the last couple of weeks. I know we're getting some foul weather today, but that's okay. Spring's not far away. And I say you're the architect to the stars because you design all sorts of things for, people, houses and playhouses and all sorts of great stuff. And been doing it from West Michigan for a long time, my friend.
Yeah, we're having some fun. Actually, last night we had a great night because our team was at the Detroit Home Magazine Awards in Detroit. Obviously, that's where they'd be. And nice segue is we won Best Vacation Home in Michigan, and we won Best Vacation Home outside of Michigan.
So you are a vacationing kind of expert. You are the right guy to talk about leisure time.
I love leisure time.
Yeah, I know you do. All right. So what's this house that you designed? What do you think set your vacation homes apart?
Well, I think as you think about vacation homes, you have to think about so many different things and how people live in them. And so, hopefully what we're doing is we're really hitting the mark on that with respect to all the different activities you can do. Outdoor living is one of the biggest trends in the marketplace. And I think that we really do a really good job of thinking about all the opportunities in outdoor living. So the home that we did in the Carolinas had lots of focus on outdoor living, as well as, obviously great indoor spaces. And, of course, beauty's important, porches are important, screened rooms are important, and those sorts of things. And
when you and I were growing up, a couple of folding chairs.
Way before me.
Oh, come on now. That hurts a little bit. When we were growing up, folding chairs and a fire in the backyard and swatting mosquitoes, that was outdoor living. But you talk about it today. In outdoor living, I mean, there are outdoor pizza ovens and bars and screened in places and pools. I mean, outdoor living, people spend as much money, I think, creating an outdoor living space as they do an indoor living space.
Yeah, outdoor living has become such a huge part of our business. And it's interesting. You're in Michigan and you have all this lousy weather for so long. But Michigan's a great place to have outdoor living because when we have good weather, it's the best in the country. And so we're doing a lot of things to make the outdoor living spaces much more interesting. One of the things that we do is we take indoor to outdoor very seriously. So the transition space can make a room that's a beautiful room during the winter months or during a nice day open up to a porch with door walls that open completely, Nana walls, Panda door walls. There's all sorts of products that let you open the inside to outside. And then you get to that patio or porch, and we're doing a ton with phantom screens, which are screened openings that literally with a push of a button will close and make your porch a screened room. So now a room that's a porch, now that there's a room in the middle of your your porch is great during the winter, looking out, you don't have any view obstruction. But of course you mentioned mosquitoes and sitting in that outside chair. It's nice to push that down in the evening and have the mosquitoes staying away.
Well, I know that for the ladies that's a big deal. Go on.
Yeah, we're doing outdoor fireplaces in those rooms. We're doing fire pits. We're doing fire tables. We're working with a company called Napoleon, and they have these fantastic fire tables that you can either have a gas line to or you can use a propane tank and create an outdoor space in a minute. So if you don't have it today and you just want to put it in your patio, you can change your outdoor living with ease.
So what I'm hearing from you, though, is a variety of ideas. And if you've got a big budget, you can do big budget, but you can do some cool stuff on a smaller budget as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, big or small, you can take it to the nines. You can have your waterfalls and you can have your outdoor fireplaces. You can have, your pergolas and your, gazebos and take advantage of really getting carried away. Or with very simple fire pit, good old-fashioned, take a tire rim and build some stones around it and throw a couple logs in the middle of the backyard. You also can make a fire pit that way.
Yeah, which actually sounds like a lot of fun. Now, if people want to see your designs or talk to you in person, your ideas, you're going to step out with a whole host of people at the Cottage and Lakefront Living Show. That's going on starting today, right?
As a matter of fact, we will be there today from 3 to 9, Friday from noon to 9, and Saturday from 10 to 8. It's a little change this year because of Easter. They've decided to have the show start early, so it is starting today on Thursday. We'll be there drawing live, designing outdoor spaces, homes, cottages. And if you want to see what that looks like, if you go to our website at Visbeen.com, you can look at the live videos of drawing homes and outdoor spaces live.
And I got to be honest, let's go to our happy place, Wayne, which is not looking out the window today, which is going to Grand Rapids and seeing all the docks and cottages and cottage furniture and all that beach life and lakefront living life at the Cottage and Lakefront Living Show. It's in Grand Rapids today, tomorrow, and, of course, Saturday. So that'll be a big event for everybody.
It's a good show. I mean, you'll be surprised at all the things they have. They have seminars and they have landscape companies, and you'll really take a look at all of the above.
Yeah, sounds like fun. And you know what? I can't wait for real summer to get here, Wayne. I greatly appreciate it, my friend, and congratulations on the big wins in Detroit yesterday.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Hey, you too. All right, let's get our toes in the sand, everybody. I mean, honestly, we're not too far away from spring in Michigan. And Wayne's right. I mean, there is no better place in America when it finally warms up than Michigan, when the skies are blue and the water is clear. I'm looking forward. Right now, Ivy and I talked about this last year. We had the best summer of our life last year, without question. We did. The kids did. We just had a fabulous summer. This summer, I think, is going to be even better. So I'm looking forward to maybe the best summer of our life one more time. All right, still to come on the program. I just got all these images of sand and sparkling water and sunsets and a couple of glasses of wine. It's my happy place. Anyhow, that Cottage Lakefront Living show is in Grand Rapids today, tomorrow, and Saturday. Still to come today is Congressman Tim Walberg. He'll be with us. Stay with us right here on the Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me, gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
And it's Thursday. Welcome back to the program, the Steve Gruber Show. Busy week, This terrorist attack in Brussels, making for a busy week. Of course, all the politics involved as well, with the conversations from Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, Hillary Clinton chiming in. Bernie Sanders kind of quiet, John Kasich irrelevant in the conversation, really. But I was just sitting here reading another story about a 400-yard tunnel that led from a restaurant in Mexicali, Mexico, to a house in Calexico, California. Apparently tons of marijuana is coming through. A 400-yard tunnel complete into the basement. Apparently the drug cartels had purchased this property in California and then built a $100,000 three-bedroom house on top of it, and all it was a decoy to hide the fact that they were building a tunnel right under it. Yeah, this is all part of the ongoing problems with securing the border. And these tunnels, this is like the 75th tunnel discovered along the U.S.-Mexico border in just the last 5 years. It's the 12th completed passage that they found along California's border in the last few years as well. Just one of the problems we face today, the criminals get smarter all the time. It's Thursday, which means Congressman Tim Walberg is here. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning. Good to be with you. And that's an interesting story.
Yeah, they're clever as to how they do it. They'll use any means necessary. They dig these tunnels and then they ship drugs that way. Just another symptom of the problem we have along the Mexican border. And all part of this bigger conversation about terrorism and securing our borders and safety and security that obviously with what happened in Brussels this week is probably the number one conversation going on right now. Did I lose you? Well, I think we might have lost the congressman for a moment. We'll get him back on. But I know that there in Washington, the big conversation, of course, is security, how we secure America, because America is just as vulnerable as Europe when it comes to terrorism and terrorism activities. And so, we have to be mindful of how we deal with that and how we deal with terrorists and how we deal with securing our country away from suicide bombers, and how we make sure that they don't have as much success, I guess. Has he made it back? All right. We'll wait for him to come back on.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are. Congressman, how are you?
Yeah, doing fine. We pulled over. We're here on M50 heading towards Charlotte, and there's some dead cell zones on that way, so we'll pull over a little bit here.
That's fine. Yeah, but you're in Michigan. How the weather, not too great today. That's another concern, but we'll get back to that. But let's talk about, what happened in Belgium and what it means for security, because America is just as vulnerable, Congressman, as you know.
Absolutely. And yesterday I sat in a hearing in Oversight Government Reform Committee when we had in front of us a number of people relative to the Customs and Border Patrol, Homeland Security responses, and it was frustrating to hear from Customs and Border Patrol leadership and agents their frustration with having basically a catch-and-release policy that's going on our southern borders. So if you have that, then you find out that there are potentially ISIS terrorists that will be coming across that border. But you've got a problem with our policy, and you only have to see what happened in Brussels to know that these people are intent upon carrying out murder and mayhem in order to express their crazy ideology and ultimately do the takeover of the world that they're intent on doing, and they're of course using their radicalized religion as a purpose for that. And we have to be intent. We can't have a president that's dancing over in Argentina or going to ball games in Cuba and having limp-wristed high fives with Castro. We have to have someone who's intent on securing our country.
You know, leading from behind has proven to be exactly what it is, a poor idea, a ridiculous foreign policy doctrine that has proven to be a failure time and again. And as you look at the southern border, I'm looking at a report from a couple of days ago, an intelligence report from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency, saying that they have as many as 75 different countries represented in the illegal aliens coming across the southern border. There's no question here. The southern border is a problem. But here's my concern, Congressman. When Republicans were in charge of the White House and had Congress in their control, nothing was done. When the Democrats were in charge, nothing was done. When it's an election year, there's a lot of talk about it, but then nothing ever gets done. What's going to be different going forward to secure our border? Anything, or is it just be typical lip service?
Well, I think it depends on who we elect. And remember, when the Republicans under Bush had both houses, that was my first term of office. Excuse me, we didn't have both houses. We had lost it, and Nancy Pelosi was there. But yet, nonetheless, we did pass, through the appropriations process, funding for the fence on the border, which has not been used since then. And that's, of course, Barack Obama took over immediately.
Well, where did the money go?
The money has still been left in places in the federal government and yet unused to fully construct that fence. And again, that is on the watch of this administration. I think that needs to be clear. We pushed it through, the funding for that fence, and it hasn't been expended in its totality. There's portions of it up, yes, but it's never been completed. And so, no, I'm going to push back on that, lay that on this administration, because they had the money, they still have the money, and
they had the authorization.
And they had the authorization.
Yeah.
Absolutely had the authorization. And then this House, since 2010, we passed a number of things. Unfortunately, the president wouldn't sign. It wouldn't get to his desk in most cases because it got blocked in the Senate, but including mandates that we would allow our Customs and Border Patrol agents to go on federal lands, national parks, etc., and police the border. As I've told you before, 50 miles back in certain cases is the closest that our Border Patrol agents can go because they can't go
we've
on
talked about that.
Bureau of Land Management land.
Yeah, we've talked about that. And I'm looking here at this report again. People coming in illegally from Somalia, Yemen, Egypt, Pakistan, the list goes on and on and on. And if ISIS is intent on doing us harm, which they are, just like they are in Europe, and they know there's a soft spot in the border where they can get across, or at least some of them can get across without getting caught, and even if they do get caught, they can claim, well, my kid's here, or some other nonsense. The Democratic policy on immigration, apparently, if you can get across the border, you're here to stay. If you can just get yourself across the border, you're good to go.
Yeah. And that can't be the case for a great country like ours that is open to people who want to be free, who want to live the American dream and ideal, and also, let's quickly add, speak our language and become American.
That's exactly right. Hold that thought, Congressman. Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break right here on the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
Somewhere between 400 and 600 soldiers from the Islamic State are said now to have spread across Europe to duplicate what we saw in Brussels here just in the last few days. 300 plus maimed and murdered in Brussels by Islamic terrorists. Say it, Islamic terrorists. That's what they are. They're not radicalized this or that. Don't kid yourself. You know, there's a reason that when Thomas Jefferson read the Quran, he decided that he could not deal with the Islamic religion and sent people, the United States Marines, for their first bit of foreign policy work in 1803. So keep that in mind. But, you know, we face the same challenges here, and leading from behind is not getting it, and glad-handing with a dictator at a baseball game while Europe is burning is it's repugnant to me that the president would do that. We're back with Congressman Tim Walberg now. And Congressman, this whole notion of leading from behind isn't working. But I do notice that the president is sending more troops back into the Middle East, very quietly trying to deny they're doing it, but they are. More troops going back in, more soldiers, more fighting. But still, they need to step it up.
Well, absolutely. And I think part of stepping up is showing resolve by the words that you state, by the actions that you give, as well as re-engaging. I think this is a great time to make sure that our allies around the world that have been a bit recalcitrant in carrying through with their responsibilities, NATO being key, it's about time that they pay the dollars that they have committed to NATO to make sure that they carry on their share as America does. And I think this is a time, if you had a strong president, he would be stating very strongly with his words and very eloquently to our allies, it is time for us to have a resolve that draws together and pay our way to make sure that this force is seen as a solid, united force against terror, against anything that goes against the causes of freedom in this world. We do not have a leader that gives that sense. We have a leader that simply is enjoying his time as a president and pushing back against anyone who wants to take a concerted effort, a mature effort, an adult effort in handling the problems of the world, starting with terrorism that is infecting our entire life.
Now, only one presidential candidate that I'm aware of called Brussels for what it was months in advance, saying there was trouble in Brussels, it was a hellhole, and was rebuked and ridiculed by the New York Times and elsewhere. But Donald Trump called it for what it was on the Fox Business Channel back in January with Maria Bartoloma. And I wonder, you know, as you look at these things, it seems that Donald Trump has the nation's attention when it comes to how to deal with terrorists, which is you kill them, and you kill them all, and you do it without mercy. It seems to me that his message is I don't know, more direct, I suppose, more blunt, more coarse. He's winning in the delegates. Ted Cruz would have to win about 80% of the delegates to pull even or ahead. John Kasich has no mathematical chance of doing anything. Is it right for John Kasich and Ted Cruz to stay in this race at this point?
Well, I think it's certainly right for Ted Cruz to stay in the race. While I respect Kasich greatly for his record, for his accomplishments, and for his positions, yet it is mathematically incapable for him to do anything except to potentially be a bit of a spoiler. I think the world situation right now is too extreme to not think very clearly about how we move forward with resolve. Because the fact of the matter, there is only one side of the aisle in this presidential race, and that's the Republican side. And I say that clearly, that understands the terrorists' actions in this world and the consequences that we'll experience. And so that's why Mr. Trump's message is resonating to the people, I believe, across the party spectrum, with the Reagan Democrats coming home to support him. We saw that here in Michigan. And I think Cruz speaks similarly and is being attacked now for taking some strong, making some strong statements on terrorism in the last several days. And frankly, what the media wants to make of it isn't necessarily what I hear from the people. I'll be in a town hall in Charlotte shortly, and I believe I'll hear the same thing there. They are concerned about the safety, security, and the strength of this country that ought to still be the strongest nation on the earth in every way, shape, or form. And it's time to take our country and put it in that place again.
When you go out and do these town halls, Congressman, with Tim Walberg this morning, and you hear from people in Charlotte and elsewhere around the state, and you have these conversations, what is the number one thing they talk about? Is it the economy? Is it terrorism and safety? What are the top concerns you're hearing this year?
Those are the top concerns. Economy and specifically job security still is number one. But that whole security aspect comes and goes to the top of the discussions with things like Brussels, for instance. It reminds people that this is not a safe world. And while America so far has not had those events take place really since 9/11 and then in Boston, but for the most part we have been kept safe. They realize that it is only a matter of time unless we're willing to step up to the plate. So that comes up, and it's a whole issue of security. Is my job secure? Is the job security of my kids there? We certainly aren't having security that we'll be continuing to expand our earning capabilities, that our wages will be going up, and that's what we need to be pushing for. And that comes with people feeling that they can count on an economy that normally works with the markets, whether you're the business person or whether you're the employee. But then when you have this whole radicalized issue going on with terrorists coming with impunity and doing things that they should never be allowed to do, then all of a sudden you don't feel safe even in your own skin, in your own communities. So those are the issues that come up, and frankly, then they say, why isn't government doing what's necessary to make us the nation that we once just assumed we were?
Well, Congressman, good luck with that town hall today. So many things to deal with, and we'll continue the conversation next week, and hopefully no terrorist attacks between here and there. Congressman Walberg, thank you so much.
Thank you, and let's move forward.
It is Thursday on the Steve Gruber Show. We'll be right back.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
All right, it's Thursday. You know, we have said it many times that the liberals, the fascist liberals, want to silence anything they don't agree with. Safe spaces and safe places on college campuses. If they don't agree with a political candidate, they'll, come by the thousands to shut it down. Just to shut it all down. And if you don't believe in climate change, if you have the nerve to question, the wisdom of climate change, or its, factual basis or not, you can go to jail. At least Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General of the United States, said that's a possibility. H. Sterling Burnett here, a Ph.D. at the Heartland Institute, to talk more about it. Sir, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on again, Steve.
What do you think, Doctor? I mean, would they really do this? Would they really go after and prosecute people? I've also heard rumors of them prosecuting ExxonMobil and others in the fossil fuel industry. What's going on?
Well, what happened is last week, Attorney General Lynch was before Congress testifying, and Sheldon Whitehouse, senator from Rhode Island, earlier last year, wrote an editorial in the New York Times saying that the Attorney General should look into prosecuting ExxonMobil, other oil companies, other energy companies, fossil fuel energy companies, and anyone that they donated money to, think tanks, if they disputed climate change, if they disputed the idea that humans were causing catastrophic global warming. He said, this is fraud. They're perpetrating upon their shareholders and the public. They're delaying action. Their actions are delaying government action because they're fighting this, and we need to prosecute. And so he asked her, what are y'all doing about this? And she said that she referred the idea to the FBI for investigation to see if they can prosecute under RICO, the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act. That's the one they go after the mob with.
Right. No, I understand. But how you know, they're also basing it on the way that the cigarette manufacturers were prosecuted, right? I mean, they're looking at a variety of different ways, but I would say that, you know, I've had people on this program, you know, doctors from MIT, yourself, a doctor, you know, a PhD, all sorts of PhDs on this program that say it's hardly settled science. There's a lot of things to be questioned and asked and determined. So I guess, could you be a target?
Well, you know, theoretically, I could, and Heartland could, my organization. It's a really scary thing, and I think that's what it's really all about. It's as you say, there's still a lot of discussion and debate and dispute going on concerning a number of facts. First, what's behind the present climate change, the warming that happened until about 18 years ago, and now the stasis that we've been in, the hiatus in warming that we've been in. Are humans playing a role? If so, how much? And what would the impacts be? So
yeah, exactly. What are the impacts? I guess because the question:
would they be bad, good? Would they be catastrophic, or would they be good in some areas, bad in other areas? And then the questions of, you know, how ought we to respond? So all these things are open to debate. And the truth, it seems to me, is an absolute defense against fraud. So,
well, here's my question. What is the ideal temperature? I mean, here's the thing. What is the ideal temperature? What is the ideal climate? Which I've asked people on this program that are believers in this global warming notion, or that America, and primarily America, by the way, is destroying the world. That's really what they think.
Yeah, well, you know, but of course now China's the biggest carbon dioxide emitter. They have been for 5 years now. So, you know, no matter what we do, if humans are causing climate change through CO2 emissions, it keeps going on. So it's like there's so many open questions, there's so much debate, and there's so many facts that go against the idea that catastrophic climate change is being caused. I mean, you know, sea levels are rising, but they're not rising at a faster rate than they were before supposedly humans were causing climate change. Polar bears aren't going extinct. The Antarctica...
No, polar bears are not going extinct. In fact, polar bear numbers are rising.
Facts. All these
polar bear numbers are rising.
Yeah, polar bear numbers are rising. Hurricane numbers are falling.
In fact, I just had that conversation yesterday. The greatest number of tornadoes in America, tornadoes are primarily a North American phenomenon, primarily America. They occur much more rarely in other parts of the world. But tornadoes here, the greatest number that I can find, I think, was 1973, and they had a stretch of 73, 74, 75, where they had a lot of tornadoes. Nothing near that since. Florida hasn't seen a Category 3 hurricane or better in something like 11 years now. It's the longest, most quiet period for hurricanes in recorded history. In fact, the worst decade for hurricanes, I believe, was the 1950s. So all of this science flies in the face of this doom and gloom nonsense they're trying to sell us.
That's right. All the data. You've got climate models on one side, and you've got evidence and reality on the other side. And they want to prosecute us based on climate models. They want to investigate us. And I really don't think it can go anywhere, because the truth is a defense against fraud. But what it is, it's intimidation. It's out there. They're
why?
thinking about
what is
it.
the point?
So you
there has to be
quiet.
something here.
It's time to shut up.
Well, there has to be a reason for this, though. I mean, what is the
reason is power. The reason is power. The administration went in and negotiated. They're not calling it a treaty. They're not going to submit it to the Senate. They're going to try and do it all through executive action. But they negotiated was basically a treaty in Paris saying we're going to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions by 28% by 2025. We're going to do this, and it's going to put a lot of people out of work. It's going to raise our energy prices. It's because government always wants to grow, and in this case, they want to control the economy. They're tired of the market and the whims of the people, and they know best how people ought to live, and they want to control the market. And they don't want people like people in the energy industry, the workers who depend on it outside of the direct energy industry, all the jobs that are created ancillary to that. They don't want groups like myself and on the Harlan Institute fighting their control of the economy. So climate change
and the control of the economy extends. Just so I'm clear on this, though, Doctor, the control of the economy extends not just through this initiative, but initiatives by the Environmental Protection Agency to control water, to control land. You know, the federal government controlling, 80% of Nevada, 60% of New Mexico is federal land now. You see the battles going on, whether you agree with the folks out at Finnecam's, where Lavoy Finnecam was killed, whether you agree with those. It's all about control of different sections of America, is what it seems like you're telling me.
Yeah, that's my belief, is that this is really about control. Politicians, in the days of old, kings controlled everything. And quite frankly, they didn't care what people did in their personal lives for the most part, as long as they sent their crops in on time and provided soldiers when it was time to go off to war and expand the king's empire. Nowadays, they're more subtle. They say we're doing it all for the people. It's for the children. But really,
yeah, it's for the children, all right. Really, but I got to run, Doctor.
Politicians in D.C.
Yeah, it's a lot of control. I got to run, Doctor. Always a good conversation. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on. Take care.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
All right, it's a tough commute out there, to say the least. You've got rain, you've got ice, farther to the north, from Traverse City up through Charlevoix and the bridge, St. Ignace and so forth. Lots of snow right now. Other parts of the state are seeing ice and rain, and and more waves of it are coming. If you're looking out the window and nothing's coming down right now, give it a little bit of time. This storm system extends all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, so we'll have to keep an eye on it, I guess, to see where it goes from here. But it is a messy day in Michigan. Be careful out there. Travel safely, my friends. And that's what I would suggest. Travel safely. Our next guest is Rob Griffin, Senior Policy Analyst at American Progress. And demographic changes, who we are as a nation, could be changing going forward. And so, more good news, for you that believe in, the America you grew up in, or believe in more conservative values and ideas. Well, it's being threatened from another direction. Rob Griffin, welcome to the program.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Well, glad to have you here. Demographically speaking, between now and, the time that I check out, probably by, 2050 or 2060, what kind of changes will happen in America, demographically speaking?
Well, there's two big kind of changes that are going to occur, at least that we can predict. There's some things that are going to change, but, you never know. Two big things that we know about is that the country is going to get older. There's going to be a larger percentage of the population that's 65 and over. This has to do with more people living longer. And the other half of it is going to be racial diversification. And that has to do with both where migration is coming from currently, as well as what sort of the population of children looks like today. So not just the migration that's happening today, but sort of the migration that was occurring even like 20 years ago, that sort of thing. So the country is going to become more racially diverse, mostly coming from Hispanic and Latino populations.
So, and as that happens, so will the country become more Catholic, for example? As the Latinos that come from south of the border oftentimes are Roman Catholics. Will there be an increase in that population?
Well, that's something I guess that would seem likely, although that's also really hard to predict. Just because people's racial, their faith can change over time. You can have religions that grow at different rates. It's something that's a little harder to predict. But it's fair, I think, to say that probably there'll be an increase in the number of Catholics. That's probably true.
I mean, I just look at other possibilities. When you look at the children today, you mentioned the birth rate, and children will change the demographic, 10 or 20 years from now as well. What are we seeing what are coming through in the wards, in the hospitals?
Yeah, so it's really because this is a true but misleading thing. Because a lot of people have this perception that there's really big differences in birth rates between racial groups, and that's true, but it's true for a reason that's a little misleading. Now, the reason it's true is actually just because there's a larger number of people among non-white groups who are in childbearing years. They're just a younger population, so they have more children as a result of that. So really, if you compare sort of, let's say, whites and Latinos, or whites and Asians, or whites and African Americans, and you compare them among those age groups that are the same, right? Let's say 18 to 25, you don't actually see birth rates all that different between those groups. It really has to do more with the age structure of the racial groups, the fact that whites are significantly older as an age group. So when we see these sort of different birth rates, it is true that that's happening, but it really has to do with the fact that it's so much younger, that portion of the population.
Now, I've seen a lot of modeling that shows that by 2050 or 2060, the Caucasian population will drop below 50% in America. Is that right, or is that wrong? What have you found in that regard?
Yeah, it's again, these things they'll wiggle around, but that's a pretty good time frame. It could be somewhere maybe as early as let's say 2045, and then but depending on how migration rates might change, or mortality rates might change. There's a number of things that could occur over the next 50 years that we can't foresee. Could push it back to something like 2065. But there's a bubble in there. There's a window that we think that'll probably occur during. Sure.
Yeah, and you look at it. I was just looking at some studies here in Michigan. Since I graduated high school, believe it or not, the life expectancy in the state of Michigan has gone up 6 years just since I graduated high school, which I think is pretty impressive. You look at life expectancy in some counties in Michigan; it's now almost 84 for women and over 80 for men. It's incredible how long people live, and that's the average, for God's sake.
Yeah, no, I mean it's really really a testament to the medical health industry in the United States. It's also the case that, although that's also one of those misleading statistics sometimes, because people are living older, certainly true, but a lot of actually where that number is coming from, the increase in life expectancy, is that people are no longer dying in childbirth, dying in childhood, I should say.
Well, that'd be a good thing.
So sometimes when you have young people who aren't dying anymore, which is one of the great innovations of the 20th century, kind of, that we've been able to bring that number down really low, it also increases life expectancy over the long term.
Sure it does. I mean, we live longer, healthier, more productive lives than any time in human history.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, there's no question about that. Rob Griffin, Senior Policy Analyst at American Progress. So I guess what I read about, conservatives and Republicans becoming a thing of the past, it might be true. I mean, if you find younger, racially diverse populations to be more likely to be left of center than right of center, then this nation may, in fact, be going that direction by way of demographics. True or false?
Well, it's possible. I'll certainly say that. If everything held true as it is today, right, if the voting habits and ideological predispositions of different racial groups stayed the same over time, we would see something like that change, just because the racial composition of eligible voters is changing, for sure. Now, the question is whether that's exactly how it's going to happen. It's certainly the case, and I tend to actually hold to this view, that political parties are pretty strategic, that over time they're going to pivot and turn themselves to make themselves appealing to a larger percentage of the population, and one that makes them electorally viable. So I don't think it's going to be the case that you're not going to see a Republican Party or something in the future. We're not going to see conservatives. It might not.
I guess we'll find out. The changing demographics of America. Stephen Burnett, thank you so much.